Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for Sisto and Jesper and all the organizers to make it happen. I just realized that it's actually like exactly 10 years ago that I went to Copenhagen for the first time and met the Danish fandom there. Well, it's such a pity that I cannot be there with you in person and seeing among the audience so many familiar faces, my friends, my fandom family, and love you all, and hope I can join you next year. So let me just share my screen. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about the Herstory of Chinese science fiction. So I call it Herstory because in the past, when many people, including myself, talking about Chinese science fiction, its history and the representative writers, we usually start with or focus on mainly male writers such as Liu Cixin and Han Song or Chen Qiufan. Of course, they are great writers, but there are also equivalently talented female writers in the history of Chinese science fiction. So I want to focus on those women writers and also some related topics about women representations and the feminist themes in the history or history of Chinese science fiction that had been rarely talked before. So first, let's talk a bit about our mythology, looking at the earliest religion of the fantastic literature. So unlike in Christian, we all know that the God creates Adam first and use his rib to create Eve. In the Chinese mythology, we have the goddess Nuwa who creates all the human beings by herself. So she is a goddess with like a half human and a half snake shape, and she feels alone, feels lonely being a goddess. So she used soil to create human beings who look like herself, but without the snake tail. And like she was creating both men and women at the same time, and those initial batch of human beings, they made together, and then the human civilization prosper afterwards. So that is like the human creation story in the Chinese mythology by the goddess Nuwa. I actually wrote an essay for the special issue of Chinese science fiction for Vector, which kind of talks about the topic I'm going to talk about today, and like a clue or like hint of this essay and also this talk is the involvement of Nuwa, because several stories at different period of the history in Chinese science fiction uses Nuwa, the goddess I just talked about, in their title and kind of as a theme or topic. And I list those stories here. You can see they are from like 1904, 1991, and 2019. So in those different stages, I will talk more about each of those stories in the coming slides, but this is just to let you know there is like a hint here. So first, in the late Qing dynasty, when science fiction was first translated into China. At that time, one of the earliest translators of science fiction from other languages into China is called Xue Shaohui. And she is a writer, translator, poet, and feminist, and more. She's actually the co-founder of China's earliest female association and a female newspaper and also female school. She co-translated Zhu's Werner's Around the World in 80 Days into Chinese together with her husband in 1900. So that book, you can see like the Chinese like version of the book, 80日环游记. That one is the earliest science fiction book translated into Chinese. So at that time, the intellectuals of China, they want to use science fiction as a way to enlighten the population and as a way to introduce science and democracy into China to save the country from like the falling of the empire team. And one thing that is particular in this version of the translation of Around the World in 80 Days is that they actually like have a reconstruction of the female protagonist and narrative, kind of giving her more agency. And I haven't read it myself, but it's like from a paper that I have read. So like Xue Shaohui, as one of the earliest feminists in China, definitely has a role there to like do this change of this female protagonist narrative. And then also in this area, in the late Qing dynasty. So when the Qing emperor and the dynasty is corrupting and like foreign colonizers, they are trying to like take control of China, there is one of the probably earliest feminist SF story in China. It's called The Stone of Nuwa. So this is like the first appearance of Nuwa here. It's written by an author called Hai Tian Du Xiaozi. So it's a pseudonym that we still don't know who they is or who they are. So we also don't know the gender of the author, but it is quite normal for authors to use pseudonym to write and publish at that era. So this The Stone of Nuwa was published in 1904, and it imagines that like women, they create like a women-only patriarch organization and try to save China from the corruption of the Qing dynasty and also the colonization from the foreign countries. So in this story, you can see like women possess various forms of expertise like martial arts or science or medicine and more. So they try to like use this underground network of this women patriarch organization, which is called Tianxianghui in this story, and collaborate with each other to, for example, kill some corrupted male officials in the country or fight against the others who are like trying to do harm to the country. So this is very interesting because many of the stories at that time, they are like more about like men saving the country, but this story, they like play it on the other side and having this feminist movement and connecting it together with the patriotic movement. So then let's move to the Republic of China, which is like after the Qing dynasty ends. And at that time, we can find probably the first science fiction text actually written by a female writer in China. So this author we know for sure is a female because the story is published in female magazine, and also the author's title, it has lady after, like it's Zhu Mingxian, Lady Zhu Mingxian. So as it's not a pseudonym and it specifies the author's gender, so we know for sure it's written by a woman. So this story is about a maid in a rich family who is fascinated by science. So like her like boss, like kind of the lady of that rich family, went to a big city to study science. So the maid want to go together with like the rich girl. However, she's not allowed because she's just a maid and she has to do housework for the family. So when the rich girl come back from the big city to her hometown and tell the maid about what she studies, the maid become fascinated about chemistry, and then she discovers a new chemical element by herself. And finally, she's recognized as a female doctor instead of just a maid who's doing housework. So the last part of the story is kind of why it is science fiction, because of this imaginated chemical element, and also like the how her life is changed by discovering that chemical element. This magazine called Female Magazine has also, it is established in 1915 and also has published many like 科学小说, which is like the translation of science fiction in early times in China. And there is a form here in Chinese, but we can only see like this writer has like a title lady in her name. So we are not sure about the genders of other writers. Probably they are male writers, but they can also contribute for this magazine. And then we came to the New China when the People's Republic of China was established in 1989. So at that time, the general environment, the general gender environment is that men and women are the same, because the country is newly established. So they need all the laborers, both men and women. So there are a lot of slogans like women hold up half of the sky and they are equal to the men. And also there are appreciation for Iron Maidens. Those Iron Maidens refer to girls who can like do the equal labor as boys, so they are no weaker than the men. So this is how the gender environment is in the mainstream narration after 1949, when the country is newly established. And then about like 9 years after, we had the first black and white science fiction film in the New China, Ballad of the Main Tombs Reservoir. So this film was actually first a stage play and then adapted into a film. And this film has like 3 parts, like the past, the present, and the future. So in the future part, they imagine the future of people's commune, and they imagine like how the people's labors can, for example, grow a lot of grains and vegetables, and then like how like those people and the laborers have gone to the Mars. So that's how it is a science fiction movie. And it's interesting that we can see in this film, they portray the women characters as what I said, like they are the same as the men and do the same laborers, and they can also be the leaders of the people's commune like men. But at the same time, even if they are like for example, the president of the people's commune, they have also to be responsible for like cooking and dancing, those like both housework and entertainment at the same time. So you can see there is a trick here, like although women can be the same as men, it's still only women who are taking care of all those housework and entertainment. So that is how not only in this particular film, but in this larger gender environment in China. And then we came to the early 1980s. So in the early 1980s, we have like another two stories, which is related two stories written by Wei Yahua, who's a male author himself. And those two stories, they also have this feminist theme. So the stories are Dream of a Soft Country and I Decided to Divorce My Robot Wife, both published in 1981. So in the story, the protagonist has married a female robot who's designed to be an obedient and beautiful and ideal wife for men. However, during the marriage, the female robot has transformed into a more self-aware and independent woman, and she's requiring her own rights and not like so obedient to her husband anymore. So in the end, like the protagonist divorced with this like female robot who has grown her own consciousness. So like the robot has grown her own consciousness, both as a robot and as a woman. So the story is published soon after the 1980 marriage law was passed. And the 1980 marriage law in China has largely enhanced the rights for women and children. And probably the author has saw this change and wrote this female wife to see how like she's like fighting for her own rights, which is deserved by her. So this story is also a very interesting like feminist science fiction story in the history. And in the same period of time in 1980s, we also see like the earliest female science fiction writers in China that we can that are still living today. So two of them are Ji Wei and Zhang Jing. So Ji Wei is writing with her pen name Miao Shi, and she began to publish science fiction in late 1970s. And I think she's living abroad now and not writing science fiction anymore. However, Zhang Jing was born in 1938 and began to write science fiction in early 1980s under the pen name Jing Jing. She is still writing today. In her 80s. I actually met her 2 years ago, and like she's still writing science fiction. And she told me that when she started to write science fiction in early 1980s, that's because at that time science fiction was regarded as a spiritual pollution, and she doesn't think it is fair. So she wants to like contribute her efforts to make justify for writing science fiction. It's not spiritual pollution. And Zhang Jing or Jing Jing, she is the author of the second Nuwa story I mentioned, which is called The Love of Nuwa. So this particular story was published in 1991 and won the third Galaxy Award, which is one of the most established science fiction award in China. And this story is a retelling of the mythology of Nuwa. So there as an alien girl, Y, came to the earth, and she is mistaken as the goddess Nuwa. So because she comes from the sky, and people think, okay, this alien must be a goddess, but because like she can fly. And she instead of going back to her original planet, she decides to stay on the earth and help the earthlings to save the earth from the big flood. And also she fulfilled the responsibility of fix the broken sky as in the mythology of Nuwa. And she marries with one of the Earthmen called Fu Xi, and they take the responsibility of the reproduction for more human beings in the story. So this story is a kind of combination of mythology and science fiction and also love story, as you can see. And in early 90s, we have like two more science fiction authors who are women and who continue to write like since 1995 or 1996 till today. So they are Lin Chen and Zhao Haihong. So they are both born in 1970s, and they are among the same generation of authors like Liu Cixin and Wang Jinkang. So they are like what we call like a newer generation of Chinese science fiction. So they began to publish at the same period. And Lin Chen is Yu Lei's pen name. So like because this pen name is very androgynous, and many readers don't know the author's gender for many years, and actually like they think it's a male author because the stories are with more like scientific details and such things. However, like it's actually a female writer, and she actually, I think her family comes from with some scientific background, and she herself is more familiar with all those things. So that's why she puts all those scientific details in the stories, and mistaken as a male author. And for Zhao Haihong, she writes in a way that's always with a female protagonist and narrates from a female perspective. And she builds those brave and adventurous female characters in her stories. So both of them are not so happy about being tagged as like feminist writing or female writing. So because at that time, we have the Fourth World Conference on Women held in Beijing in 1995. So that's when the second wave of gender discussions is unveiled in China. And that's also when the concept of feminist literature and female writing emerge in the Chinese context. However, at that time, there are a lot of people or publishers, they are commercializing the concept of female writers' expression of love, desire, and sexual experiences. And they mark that as beauty writing, and then later on like as body writing. So those like commercialization of beauty writing or body writing, they kind of suppressed the possibilities of other like female writing. So that's why the female writers, they are not so happy about being tagged of female writing. And then we came to early 2000s. And in 2004, we have probably, I think it is the like bestseller by a women author in China, in Chinese science fiction. So this author is called Qian Lifang. She's a history teacher in middle school, and she published this historical science fiction novel called Providence or Tianyi. So this is like a phenomenon book before Liu Cixin's The Three-Body Trilogy, and it has won a special award for the Galaxy Award. So it is a historical science fiction set in Qing and Han dynasties in ancient China. So the book is divided into two parts. One is centered on Han Xin, who is a famous hero, which actually exists in the Chinese history. And the other part is focused on Jijiang, which is a fictional character and who is a girl that is equally intelligent as Han Xing. But because she is a girl, and in ancient China, there are many things that she cannot do, but she is kind of the soulmate of Han Xing. And those two people together, they save the earth from some alien technologies. And in 2018, there is a TV net series adaptation of this book called Hero's Dream. So in the TV net series adaptation, Hero's Dream, they add in time travel narrative. They make it like the author who wrote the book time traveled back to the Qing Han dynasty and being Jijiang herself and encounter all those things. If you are interested, I think it can be checked online. And also in early 2000, we have 3 female writers who are all born in 1984 start to writing. So 1984, of course, is an important and unique year. So one of them is Xia Jia or Wang Yao. She's both a science fiction writer and also scholar herself. She's now like teaching in Xi'an Jiaotong University, and she's already the dean of their Chinese literature department. She has been dedicating to science fiction studies for years. And for her writing, she began to publish science fiction in 2003. And when she first published, her stories are regarded as like very soft because she used a lot of fairy tales and fantasy in her science fiction stories and not so many scientific details. So she called her own writing porridge SF. So like porridge is softer rice. So she regarded her porridge SF as softer than soft science fiction. And Hao Jingfang, we know, is the 2nd Hugo Award winner in China. And she won the Hugo Award in 2016 with her novelette, Folding Beijing. And she also began to publish science fiction in early 2000. Her writing, she called her writing as like non-type writing. Non-type writing because she crossed the boundary of speculative fiction and realistic fiction. She is interested in writing about those realistic issues in that speculative fiction space. As Folding Beijing, you can see it is a story about the population issue in China, but she put it in like speculative setting in which the cities can actually fold. And the different classes of people, they live in different time period. And for Chi Hui, she's actually a graduate of biology. And she, in early years, she also writes different genres with different pen names, like fantasy and game literature and science fiction, all with different pen names. But nowadays, she's mainly use her like original name, Chi Hui, to write science fiction. And I think her story is not translated into English so much, but it's also great because she has several novels and a lot of short stories. And her stories are like very like, let's say, like they can draw your attention from the beginning towards the end, because it's a really like good reading stories. And also she has like a story called Insect Next, in which she created this alien planet where like the girls, they are growing their own boy trees, and those girls and boys, they are a couple. However, like the girls are kind of not the leaders of the society, but both the caretakers and also decision makers of the society. So you can see in the alien society she creates, the gender relationship is not like one over the other. It's more like interdependent and collaborative with each other. So it's a very interesting story. I think it has a German translation, so probably you should be able to read it, but not in English yet. And then in 2010s, there are like more women authors starting to write science fiction, like Gu Shi. She is actually an urban planner, and she's a very typical generation of author, because in the early years of writing science fiction, she only use like a male protagonist, and she says in the interview that, okay, I don't think there is much difference between men and women writing science fiction. However, in recent years, her attitude has changed, and she has been writing those all-female science fiction stories, and she's like putting more female awareness into her own stories. I think that's because of the larger environment of gender discussion has changed in China as well. And Wu Shuang, she's both a science fiction writer and screenwriter, and she has also like contributed a lot of stories related with food, and also like the ancient Chinese mythology and history. So her writing style is also, you can see, like not with that many scientific details, but like bringing in more of our cultural heritage. And one of the stories of her that has been translated into English is called The Face Crafter, and it's in Clark's World, so it can be read online. It's also very interesting because in this story, she writes about androgynous god that is called Huandun, and the god is trying to help to save the earth in its apocalyptic disaster. And also there is me. So I myself also like began to publish in 2013. And for me, I can see like when I am writing, my female awareness grow in those science fiction stories. So probably in the very beginning, I'm like unconscious of it at all. But we got a lot of questions like, as a girl or as a woman, why do you choose to write science fiction, not romance? I was like, why do you ask me this question, but you never ask a male author why does he write science fiction? So in this process, I think this generation of authors, we have more and more awareness of being a female science fiction writer. We are inputting more of our experiences into our stories. And there are like two particular texts by two particular authors I want to mention about this feminist expression in science fiction. So one is Chen Jingbo, who actually like began to publish science fiction in 1999, and she has also edited anthology for women writers in China from 1983 to now. So she has said women have never been absent in the history of Chinese science fiction. And in her story, Host, it's about a women's road trip in Lenghu, which is like a Martian-like town in the Gobi Desert in China. And in this story is also like very rare of its kind in Chinese science fiction, because it's this road trip about a woman in search for her husband. And in the process of her road trip, she began to find more and more about the truth of herself. And it has won the first prize of Lenghu Award that year. The other story I want to mention is by Xiu Xinyu, and she's like younger generation of author, but also began to publish in early 2010s. And her story called Big Nuwa Era is the third story I want to mention about the Nuwa involvement. So the story was actually first called Eve and Eve, and the author has rewritten a version and renamed it into Big Nuwa Era. You can see like she changed the reference from the Western to the Chinese goddess. And in this story, it's about those aliens who come from the planet Nuwa. They came to Earth, and suddenly they are taking away all the women on the Earth. So like leaving all the men in chaotic and like they are afraid because all those women are taken away by those alien Nuwa. So three men, they kidnapped one of the alien Nuwa and try to torture her and get the secret of the planet Nuwa. But in the end, it turns out to be men are just some like so the aliens, they created the human beings on the Earth. However, like women are like what they originally want to create, and men are just created because of some mistake. So I also want to talk about the science fiction industry in China a little bit, because three of the major science fiction startups in China, they all have women CEOs. One is Yang Feng, who is the CEO of 8 Light Minute, and she's the former vice editor-in-chief of Science Fiction World. And 8 Light Minute, they are doing a lot of publications now. And Ji Shaoting, she's CEO of Future Affairs Administration. And they are also like translating a lot of foreign science fiction into Chinese, and also like cultivating and having workshops and courses for new writers. And Zhang Yiwen, who's the CEO of Storycom, and they are doing a lot of science fiction story adaptations in China. And you can see like they are also very important figures in the Chinese science fiction industry. And the last but not least, in the past 3 years, we have 4 different female writer anthologies of Chinese science fiction and also fantasy. So the first one is the one I mentioned before, edited by Chen Jingbo. It's called She, a collection of the classic works of Chinese female science fiction writers. So she collected 33 women writers in the history of Chinese science fiction, and both including their stories and also including their answers for different questions. And the one question that she asks everyone is, how do you think about being a women science fiction writer or being a female science fiction writer? So you can see those 33 writers gave very different answers towards the same question, and it's very interesting. And the second is her science fiction, which is a 4-volume anthology edited by Chen Qiufan. So this is more like a light novel. So they are targeted at probably a younger generation of readers, and selecting those more like light, as we say, like more not that heavy stories in science fiction. And the third one is The Way Spring Arrives and Other Stories, edited by Yu Chen and me. So this is both published in English and Chinese, and now it's also in Korean as well. So this is a like anthology including both science fiction and fantasy and magical realism. So we don't set a specific boundary between science fiction and the other genres, but include all fantastic literatures. And this one is like you can read because it's in English, and highly recommend it because I love it. It's my book baby. And the fourth one is Running Red, Chinese female science fiction writers anthology. It's only published in Japanese for now, and it's edited by Tian Jingwu, Teruyuki Hashimoto, and Kazumi Oi. So this book also includes like I think a dozen of female science fiction writers in China, and translate their stories for the Japanese writers. So you can see all those 4 anthologies, they are planned and published totally independently, but in like 2001 and 2002. So it's a trend that people are like having more awareness of those female writers in China, because in the past, although non-anthologies are called like all men anthology, but you will find 90% or sometimes even 100% of the stories are contributed by male writers. So I have like the last 5 minutes, and we'll take questions.
Wow.
Thank you.
That was perfectly timed. I think what we're going to do is, like, you ask questions and I will repeat them. Does that make sense? Oh, right.
Okay.
Yeah. Anybody have questions? Questions? 0 questions. That's one. Yeah.
What are some of your favorite themes that are emerging right now in the fantasy science fiction landscape, particularly where where women authors are contributing?
So one of the audience members are asking if there's any emerging themes in the female authors literature right now.
Yeah, I think like in the past, it's very interesting because like you can see a lot of those feminist themes of the stories, they are not written by female authors. They are probably like more male writers. They are interested in writing about feminist themes. But in recent years, I think there is a change, and more women writers, they have been like writing about feminist themes, and also I think many of them, they are writing about artificial intelligence, which is not only popular among like women, but also among like all the writers, because it's like so close to our real life for now. And the many new writers, especially who are not like reading or writing science fiction before, nowadays, as they start to write science fiction, and artificial intelligence tends to be their first target, because it's like so close to our real life now.
Hi, Regina, it's Pia. Hi.
I moved that bit closer to
Yeah,
you.
I just want to ask you, what are you working on right now?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm actually working on my PhD dissertation right now, and my PhD is at the University of Oslo with the Co-Futures project, and I'm focusing on the women authors' work of Chinese science fiction, and I try to look at the gender and the environmental perspective of their stories. So I'm in the last year of writing my dissertation, so that's also like partly why I cannot join you nowadays, because my supervisor think I should focus on my dissertation writing. I have been written papers on those authors I just mentioned before, and hopefully I can finish next April.
Are sci-fi a big genre in China, or is it more like a niche thing?
He asked, one of the audience asks if science fiction is a big genre in China or a niche thing?
Before, like I think 10 years ago, it is very niche in China. But in the recent 10 years, it has become very large because the three-body problem has been a phenomenal work, and it has won the Hugo, and also then Hao Jingfang, as I mentioned, Folding Beijing won another Hugo. So like Hugo Award has been regarded a big thing in China. And so after they won the Hugo Award, both like the government attention and business interest, and also those popularity among normal readers who used to think science fiction just as children's literature, they suddenly come all together, and everything comes like in the recent 10 years. So science fiction nowadays is really big in China, but 10 years ago, it's totally a niche market.
I think sadly we're running out of time, but I think we should thank Regina for giving us an overview.
Thank you all so much for being here.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the con.